Здравейте на всички. Преди да продължа с темите, искам да благодаря отново на всички, които гледат. Оценявам страшно много вашето внимание, че го прекарате в тези видеа. И на тези също, които им действам, очевидно, приспевателно, за мен пак е плюс. Важното е, че гледате, дори и подсъзнателно. Да, искам сега да кажа, че тази седмица края най-вероятно няма да качам нищо петък, събота и неделя, мисля, че, или събота, неделя, понеделник, защото имам няколко важни ангажимента, които чакам от доста време, затова подготвям от сега, че ще има една кратка паузичка, но след това ще се върна, така че няма страшно. Следващата тема е On quibbling as unworthy of the philosopher. In answer to the letter which you wrote me while traveling, a letter as long as the journey itself, I shall reply later. I ought to go into retirement and consider what sort of advice I should give you, for you yourself who consult me also reflected for a long time whether to do so. How much more then should I myself reflect, since more deliberation is necessary in settling than in propounding a problem? And this is particularly true when one thing is advantageous to you and another to me. Am I speaking again in the guise of an Epicurean? But the fact is, the same thing is advantageous to me which is advantageous to you. For I am not your friend unless whatever it is at issue concerning you is my concern as well. Friendship produces between us a partnership in all our interests. There is no such thing as good or bad fortune for the individual. We live in common, and no one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility. You must live for your neighbor if you would live for yourself. Абсолютно съм съгласен с това, между другото, че начинът, по който третираш хората около себе си е изключително показващо какъв човек си ти, и в момента, разбира се, защото няма как да поддържаме едно и също състояние постоянно, но също така може да се погледне, понеже тук се казва neighbor, нали, със съседа, както и също и в Библията по същия начин се спомена, пак се казва neighbor, но в случая не винаги е neighbor, просто, нали, буквалният смисъл neighbor, просто хората, които ви заобикалят. Просто не е толкова да използваме думата в крайност. Така. This fellowship maintained with scrupulous care, which makes us mingle as men with our fellow men and holds that the human race have certain rights in common, is also of great help in cherishing the more intimate fellowship which is based on friendship, concerning which I began to speak above, for he that has much in common with a fellow man will have all things in common with a friend. And on this point, my excellent Lucius, I should like to have those subtle dialecticians of yours advise me how I ought to help a friend or how a fellow man, rather than tell me in how many ways the word friend is used, and how many meanings the word man possesses. Lo, wisdom and folly are taking opposite sides. Which shall I join? Which party would you have me follow? On that side, man is the equivalent of friend. On the other side, friend is not the equivalent of man. The one wants a friend for his own advantage. The other wants to make himself an advantage to his friend. What you have to offer me is nothing but distortion of words and splitting of syllables. It is clear that unless I can devise some very tricky premises and by false deductions tack onto them to a fallacy which springs from the truth, I shall not be able to distinguish between what is desirable and what is to be avoided. I am ashamed. Извинявам се за... Вече няма да има такива неща. Old men as we are dealing with a problem so serious we make play of it. Mouse is a syllable. Now a mouse eats its cheese, therefore a syllable eats cheese. Suppose now that I cannot solve the problem here. See, what peril hangs over my head as a result of such ignorance. What a scrape I shall be in. Without a doubt, I must beware, or some day I shall be catching syllables in a mousetrap. Or, if I grow careless, a book may devour my cheese. Unless perhaps the following syllogism is shrewder still. Mouse is a syllable. Now a syllable does not eat cheese. Therefore a mouse does not eat cheese. What childish nonsense! Do we knit our brows over this sort of problem? Do we let our beards grow long for this reason? Is this the matter which we teach with sour and pale faces? Ще го прочета още веднъж, за да се солидифайне този абзац. Mouse is a syllable. Now a mouse eats cheese. Therefore, a syllable eats cheese. Suppose now that I cannot solve this problem. See what peril hangs over my head as a result of such ignorance. What a scrape I shall be in. Without a doubt, I must beware, or someday I shall be catching syllables in a mousetrap. Or, if I grow careless, a book may devour my cheese. Unless perhaps the following syllogism is shrewder still. Mouse is a syllable. Now a syllable does not eat cheese. Therefore a mouse does not eat cheese. What childish nonsense! Do we knit our brows over this problem? Do we let our beards grow long for this reason? Is this the matter which we teach with sour and pale faces? Ако някой стигне до това видео и този абзац, много бих се радвал да ми кажете по какъв начин го интерпретирате, защото ми е интересно вашата гледна точка, вместо да ви слагам граница от това какво е моето мнение. Затова бих желал да чуя какво мислите по въпроса. Would you really know what philosophy offers to humanity? Philosophy offers counsel. Death calls away one man, and poverty chafes another. A third is worried either by his neighbor's wealth or by his own. So-and-so is afraid of bad luck. Another desires to get away from his own good fortune. Some are ill-treated by men, others by the gods. Why then do you frame for me such games as these? It is no occasion for jest. You are retained as a counsel for unhappy mankind. You have promised to help those in peril by sea, those in captivity, the sick and the needy, and those whose heads are under the poisoned axe. Whither are you straying? What are you doing? This friend, in whose company you are jesting, is in fear. Help him, and take the noose from about his neck. Men are stretching our imploring hands to you on all sides. Lives ruined and in danger of ruin are begging for some assistance. Men's hopes, men's resources depend upon you. They ask that you deliver them from all their restlessness, that you reveal to them, scattered and wandering as they are, the clear light of truth. Tell them what nature has made necessary, and what superfluous. Tell them how simple are the laws that she has laid down, nature. How pleasant and unimpeded life is for those who follow these laws. But how bitter and perplexed it is for those who have put their trust in opinion rather than in nature. Facts. I should deem your games of logic to be some avail in revealing men's burdens. If you could first show me what part of these burdens they will relieve, what among these games of yours banishes lust or controls it, would that I could say that they were merely of no profit. They are positively harmful. I can make it perfectly clear to you whenever you wish that a noble spirit, when involved in such subtleties, is impaired and weakened. I am ashamed to say what weapons they supply to men who are destined to go to war with fortune, and how poorly they equip them. Is this the path to the greatest good? Is philosophy to proceed by such claptrap and by quibbles which would be disgrace and a reproach even for expounders of the law? For what else is it that you men are doing when you deliberately ensnare the person to whom you are putting questions, than making it appear that the man has lost his ease on a technical error? But just as the judge can reinstate those who have lost the suit in this way, so philosophy has reinstated these victims of quibbling to their former condition. Why do you men abandon your mighty promises, and after having assured me in high-sounding language that you will permit the glitter of gold to dazzle by my eyesight no more than the gleam of the sword, and that I shall, with mighty steadfastness, spurn both that which all men crave and that which all men fear, why do you descend to the ABCs of scholastic penance? What is your answer? Is this the path to heaven? For that is exactly what philosophy promises to me, that I shall be made equal to God. For this I have been summoned. For this purpose have I come. Philosophy, keep your promise. Therefore, my dear Lucilius, withdraw yourself as far as possible from these exceptions and objections of so-called philosophers. Frankness and simplicity beseem true goodness. Even if there are many years left to you, even if there were many years left to you, you would have to spend them frugally in order to have enough for the necessary things. But as it is, when your time is so scant, what madness it is to learn superfluous things. Farewell. Много красиво. Както казах по-рано, няма да влизам дълбочина толкова много, тъй като искам да продължа. On the faults of the spirit. You can persuade me into almost anything now, for I was recently persuaded to travel by water. We cast off when the sea was lazily smooth. The sky, to be sure, was heavy with nasty clouds, such as usually break into rain or squalls. Still, I thought that the few miles between Puteoli and your dear Parthenope might be run off in quick time, despite the uncertain and lowering sky. So, in order to get away more quickly, I made straight out to sea for Nessus, with the purpose of cutting across all the inlets. But when we were so far out that it made little difference to me whether I returned or kept on, the calm weather, which had enticed me, came to naught. The storm had not yet begun, but the ground swell was on, and the waves kept steadily coming faster. I began to ask the pilot to put me ashore somewhere. He replied that the coast was rough and a bad place to land, and that in a storm he feared the lee shore more than anything else. But I was suffering too grievously to think of the danger, since a sluggish sea-sickness which brought no relief was racking me, the sort that upsets the liver without clearing it. Therefore, I laid down the law to my pilot, forcing him to make for the shore, willy-nilly. When we drew near, I did not wait for things to be done in accordance with Virgil's orders, until prow faced seawards, or anchor plunged from bow. I remembered my profession as a veteran devotee of cold water, and clad as I was in my cloak, let myself down into the sea, just as a cold water batter should. What do you think my feelings were, scrambling over the rocks, searching out the path, or making one for myself? I understood that sailors have good reason to fear the land. It is hard to believe what I endured when I could not endure myself. You may be sure that the reason why Ulysses was shipwrecked on every possible occasion was not so much because the sea god was angry with him from his birth. He was simply subject to seasickness. And in the future, I also, if I must go anywhere by sea, shall only reach my destination in the 20th year. When I finally calmed my stomach, in brackets, for you know that one does not escape seasickness by escaping from the sea, and refreshed my body with rub down, I began to reflect how completely we forget or ignore our failings, even those that affect the body, which are continually reminding us of their existence. Not to mention those which are more serious in proportion as they are more hidden. A slight ache deceives us, but when it has increased, and a genuine fever has begun to burn, it forces even a hardy man who can endure much suffering to admit that he is ill. There is pain in the foot, and a tingling sensation in the joints, but we still hide the complaint and announce that we have sprained a joint, or else are tired from overexercise. Then the ailment, uncertain at first, must be given a name, and when it begins to swell the ankles also, and has made both our feet right feet, we are bound to confess that we have the gout. The opposite holds true of diseases of the soul. The worse one is, the less one perceives it. You need not be surprised, my beloved Lucilius, for he whose sleep is light pursues visions during slumber. For he whose sleep is light pursues visions during slumber, and sometimes, though asleep, is conscious that he is asleep. But sound slumber annihilates all our very dreams and sinks the spirit down so deep that it has no perceptions of self. Why will no man confess his faults? Because he is still in their grasp. Only he who is awake can recount his dream, and similarly a confession of sin is a proof of sound mind. Let us therefore rouse ourselves that we may be able to correct our mistakes. Philosophy, however, is the only power that can stir us, the only power that can shake off our deep slumber. Devote yourself wholly to philosophy. You are worthy of her. She is worthy of you. Greet one another with a loving embrace. Say farewell to all other interests with courage and frankness. Do not study philosophy merely during your spare time. If you were ill, you would stop caring for your personal concerns and forget your business duties. You would not think highly enough for any client to take active charge of his case during a slight abatement of your sufferings. You would try your hardest to be rid of the illness as soon as possible. What then? Shall you not do the same thing now? Throw aside all hindrances and give up your time to getting a sound mind, for no man can attain it if he is engrossed in other matters. Philosophy wields her own authority. She appoints her own time and does not allow it to be appointed for her. She is not a thing to be followed at odd times, but a subject for daily practice. She is mistress, and she commands our attendance. Alexander, when a certain state promised him a part of his territory and half its entire property, replied, I invaded Asia with the intention not of accepting what you might give, but of allowing you to keep what I might leave. Philosophy likewise keeps saying to all occupations, I do not intend to accept the time which you have left over, but I shall allow you to keep what I myself shall leave. Turn to her, therefore, with all your soul, sit at her feet, cherish her. A great distance will then begin to separate you from other men. You will be far ahead of all mortals, and even the gods will not be far ahead of you. Do you ask what will be the difference between yourself and the gods? They will live longer, but, by my faith, it is a sign of a great artist to have confined a full likeness to the limits of miniature. The wise man's life spreads out to him over as large a surface as does all eternity to a god. There is one point in which the sage has an advantage over the god, for a god is freed from terrors by bounty of nature, the wise man by his own bounty. What a wonderful privilege to have the weakness of a man and the serenity of a god. The power of philosophy to blunt the blows of chance is beyond belief. No missile can settle in her body. She is well protected and impenetrable. Okay. She spells the force of some missiles and wards them off with the loose fields of her groan. As if they had no power to harm, others she dashes aside and hurls them back with such force that they recoil upon the sender. Farewell. Много красиво. On Vaitia's villa. I have just returned from a ride in my litter and I am so weary as if I had walked a distance instead of being seated. Even to be carried for any length of time is hard work, perhaps all the more so because it's an unnatural exercise, for nature gave us legs which to do our own walking and eyes with which to do our own seeing. Our luxuries have condemned us to weakness. We have ceased to be able to do which we have long declined to do. Nevertheless, I found it necessary to give my body a shaking up in order that the bile which had gathered in my throat, if that was my trouble, might be shaken out, or if the very breath within me had become for some reason too thick, then that the jolting which I have felt was a good thing for me might have made it thinner. So I insisted on being carried longer than usual along an attractive beach which bends between Kumaya and Servilius Vatia's country house, shut in by the sea on the one side and the lake on the other, just like a narrow path. It was packed firm underfoot because of a recent storm, since, as you know, the waves, when they beat up upon the beach hard and fast, level it out. But a continuous period of fair weather loosens it, when the sand, which is kept firm by the water, loses its moisture. As my habit is, I began to look about for something there that might be of service to me, when my eyes fell upon the villa which had once belonged to Vatia. So this was the place where the famous praetorian millionaire passed his old age. He was famed for nothing else than his life of leisure, and he was regarded as lucky only for that reason. For whenever men were ruined by their friendship with Asinius Gallus, whenever others were ruined by their hatred for Sejanus, and later by their intimacy with him, for it was no more dangerous to have offended him than to have loved him, people used to cry out, "Oh, Vatia, you alone know how to live." But that he knew was how to hide, not how to live, and it makes a great deal of difference whether your life will be one of leisure or one of idleness. So I never drove past his country place during Vatia's lifetime without saying to myself, "Here lies Vatia." But my dear Lucilius, philosophy is a thing of holiness, something to be worshipped, So much so that the very counterfeit pleases. For the mass of mankind consider that a person is at leisure who has withdrawn from society, is free from care, self-sufficient, and lives for himself. But these privileges can be the reward only of the wise man. Does he who is a victim of anxiety know how to live for himself? What? Does he even know how to live at all? And that is of first importance. For the man who has fled from affairs and from men who has been banished to seclusion by the unhappiness which his own desires have brought upon him, who cannot see his neighbor more happy than himself, who through fear has taken to concealment like a frightened and sluggish animal. This person is not living for himself, he is living for his belly, his sleep, and his lust. And that is the most shameful thing in the world. He who lives for no one does not necessarily live for himself. Nevertheless, there is so much in steadfastness and adherence to one's purpose that even sluggishness is, if stubbornly maintained, assumes an air of authority with us. I could not describe the villa accurately, for I am familiar only with the front of the house and with the parts which are in public view and can be seen by the mere passerby. There are two grottos, which cost a great deal of labor, as big as the most spacious hall made by hand. One of these does not admit the rays of the sun, while the other keeps them until the sun sets. There is also a stream running through a grove of plane trees, which draws for its supply both on the sea and on Lake Acheron. It intersects the grove just like a raceway and is large enough to support fish, although its waters are continually being drawn off. When the sea is calm, however, they do not use the stream, only touching the well-stocked waters when the storm gives the fishermen a forced holiday. But the most convenient thing about the villa is the fact that Baya is next door. It is free from all the inconveniences of that resort, and yet enjoys its pleasures. I myself understand these attractions, and I believe that it is a villa suited for every reason to every reason of the year. It fronts the west wind, which it intercepts in such a way that Baya is denied it. So it seems that Vatya was no fool when he selected this place as the best in which to spend his leisure when it was already unfruitful and decrepit. The place where one lives, however, can contribute little towards tranquility. It is the mind which must make everything agreeable to itself. I have seen men despondent in a gay and lovely villa, and I have seen them to all appearance full of busyness in the midst of a solitude. For this reason, you should not refuse to believe that your life is well placed merely because you are now in Campania. But why are you not there? Just let your thoughts travel even to this place. You may hold converse with your friends when they are absent, and indeed as often as you wish, and for so long as you wish. For we enjoy the greatest of pleasures all the more when we are absent from one another. For the presence of friends makes us fastidious, and because we can at any time talk or sit together. When once we have parted, we give not a thought to those whom we have just beheld. And we ought to bear the absence of friends cheerfully, just because everyone is bound to be often absent from his friends, even when they are present. Include among such cases in the first place the nights spent apart, then the different engagements which each of two friends has, then the private studies of each and their excursions into the country, and you will see that foreign travel does not rob of us so much. And a friend should be retained in the spirit. Such a friend can never be absent. He can see every day whomsoever he desires to see. I would therefore have you share your studies with me, your meals and your walks. We should be living within the narrow limits of anything were barred to our thoughts. I see you, my dear Lucius, and at this very moment I hear you. I am with you to such an extent that I hesitate whether I should not begin to write you notes instead of letters. Farewell. О, невероятен е този спич просто. Наистина. Ще прочетем още една тема, че On quiet and study. Beshrew me if I think anything more requisite than silence for a man who secludes himself in order to study. Imagine what a variety of noises reverberates about my ears. I have lodgings right over a bathing establishment, So picture to yourself the assortment of sounds which are strong enough to make me hate my very powers of hearing. When your strenuous gentleman, for example, is exercising himself by flourishing laden weights when he's working hard, or else pretends to be working hard, I can hear him grunt, and whenever he releases his imprisoned breath, I can hear him painting in wheezy and high-pitched tones. Or perhaps I notice some lazy fellow content with a cheap rub-down, and I hear the crack of the pummeling hand on his shoulder, varying in sound according as the hand is laid on flat or hollow. Then perhaps a professional comes along, shouting out the score. That is the finishing touch. Add to this the arresting of an occasional roisterer of pickpocket, the racket of the man who always likes to hear his own voice in the bathroom, or the enthusiast who plunges in the swimming tank with unconscionable noise and splashing. Unconscionable. Предполагам, нали, че едва ли че не осъзнава колко шум втига. Просто unconscionable, да се не съм чул така да. Besides all those whose voices, if nothing else, are good, imagine the hair plucker with his penetrating shrill voice for purposes of advertisement, continually giving it vent and never holding his tongue except when he is plucking the armpits and making his victim yell instead. Then the cake seller with his varied cries, the sausage man, the confectioner, and all the vendors of food hawking their wares, each with his own distinctive intonation. So you say, what iron nerves or deadened ears you must have if your mind can hold out amid so many noises, so various and so discordant, when our friend Chrysippus is brought to his death by the continual good morrow that greets him. But I assure you that this racket means no more to me than the sound of waves of falling water. Although you will remind me that a certain tribe once moved their city merely because they could not endure the din of a Nile cataract, words seem to distract me more than noises, for words demand attention, but noises merely fill the ears and beat upon them. Among the sounds that din round me without distracting, I include passing carriages, a machinist in the same block, a saw sharpener nearby, or some fellow who is demonstrating with little pipes and flutes at the trickling fountain, shouting rather than singing. Забелязал съм също аз, когато постигна, нали, някакво медитативно състояние, когато успееш да не характеризираш звуковете си около себе си, е доста приятно състояние на разума като цяло. И наистина, когато има думи, които чуваш, е малко по-трудно да се концентрираш, тъй като мозъкът ти веднага им дава някаква важност и ги характеризира. Furthermore, но се изисква някакво усилие със сигурно да се стигне до, нали, то не е усилие в интерес, просто някаква работа. Просто да го практикуваш в някакъв момент, ще се стигне до там. Някой път го губиш, някой път се връща. Да успееш, нали, едва ли не да не даваш характер на звуковите, които идват, а просто като едно цяло, като просто вибрации. Нали, е доста приятно. Неприятно, но не знам точната дума да я опиша състоянието. Furthermore, an intermittent noise upsets me more than a steady one. But by this time I have toughened my nerves against all that sort of thing, so I can endure even a boat swaying, marking the time in high-pitched tones for his crew. For I force my mind to concentrate and keep it from straying to things outside itself. All outdoors may be bedlam, provided that there is no disturbance within, provided that fear is not wrangling with desire in my breast, provided that meanness and lavishness are not at odds, one harassing the other. For what of benefit is a quiet neighborhood if our emotions are in an uproar? 'Twas night, and all the world was lulled to rest. This is not true, for no real rest can be found when reason has not done the lulling. Night brings our troubles to the light rather than banishes them. It merely changes the form of our worries. For even when we seek slumber, our sleepless moments are as harassing as the daytime. Real tranquility is the state reached by an unperverted mind when it is relaxed. Think of the unfortunate man who courts sleep by surrendering his spacious mansion to silence, who, that his ear may be disturbed by no sound, bids the whole retinue of his slaves be quiet, and that whoever approaches him shall walk on tiptoe. He tosses from this side to that and seeks a fitful slumber amid his frettings. He complains that he has heard sounds when he has not heard them at all. The reason, you ask? His soul is in an uproar. It must be soothed, and its rebellious murmuring checked. You need not suppose that the soul is at peace when the body is still. Sometimes quiet means disquiet. We must we must therefore rouse ourselves to action and busy ourselves with interests that are good, as often as we are in the grasp of uncontrollable sluggishness. Great generals, when they see that their men are mutinous, check them by some sort of labor or keep them busy with small forays. The much occupied man has no time for wantoness. And it is in an obvious commonplace that the evils of leisure can be shaken off by hard work. Although people may often have thought that I sought seclusion because I was disgusted with politics and regretted my hapless and thankless position, yet in the retreat to which apprehension and weariness have driven me, my ambition sometimes develops afresh. For it is not because my ambition was rooted out that it has abated, but because it was wearied or perhaps even put out of temper by the failure of its plans. And so with luxury also would sometimes seem to have departed, and then, when we have made a profession for frugality, begins to fret us, and amid our economies seeks the pleasures which we have merely left but not condemned. Indeed, the more steadily it comes, the greater its force. For all unconcealed vices are less serious. A disease also is farther on the road to being cured when it breaks forth from concealment and manifests its power. So with greed, ambition, and the other evils of the mind, you may be sure that they do most harm when they are hidden behind the pretense of soundness. Men think that we are in retirement, yet we are not. For if we have sincerely retired and have sounded the signal to retreat, and have scorned outward attraction, then, as I remarked above, no outward thing will distract us. No music of men or of birds can interrupt good thoughts when they have once become steadfast and sure. The mind which starts at words or at chance sounds is unstable and has not yet withdrawn into itself. It contains within itself an element of anxiety and rooted fear, and this makes one a prey to care, as our Virgil says. I, whom of yore no dart could cause to flee, nor Greeks with crowded lines of infantry, now shake at every sound and fear the air, both for my child and for the load I bear. This man in his first state is wise. He blenches neither at the brandished spear, nor at the clashing armor of the serrying foe, nor at the din of the stricken city. This man in his second state lacks knowledge, fearing for his own concerns. He pales at every sound, any cry is taken for the battle shout and overthrows him. The slightest disturbance reddens him, breathless with fear, renders him with breathless fear. It is the load that makes him afraid. Select anyone you please from among your favorites of fortune, trailing their many responsibilities, carrying their many burdens, and you will behold a picture of Virgil's hero, fearing both for his child and for the load he bears. You may therefore be sure that you are at peace with yourself when no noise readies you, when no word shakes you out of yourself, whether it be flattery or a threat, or merely an empty sound buzzing about you with unmeaning din. What then, you say? It is not sometimes a simpler matter just to avoid the uproar, I admit this. Accordingly, I shall change from my present quarters. I merely wish to test myself and to give myself practice. Why need I be tormented any longer when Ulysses found so simple a cure for his comrades even against the songs of the sirens? Farewell. Почнах вече да се обърквам, че много ми се доспа, затова мисля, че е време да приключвам за днес. Благодаря за слушането на всички. Желая ви с приятна вечер или ден. И да, ние изпълнени с разбиране и с работа върху себе си. Бъдете добри с околните, така както бихте добри били с най-близките си хора. И така, желая ви един, това беше пис, да, беше... Да, пичове, но се разгавих. Айде, лекичка.